time to the big story in Washington. The proof is now public that the U.S. government snooping works to stop terrorists. This has gone beyond metadata and numbers crunching and officials talking in general terms. Folks, we now have names. We have faces, we have targets. Look at this with me. Details were declassified and then put on the record at this hearing this morning on Capitol Hill. The chief of the National Security Agency and leaders at the FBI, they named these specific 4 plots that they say were disrupted, were thwarted because of the surveillance programs that critics call a mass invasion of privacy. That is 4 plots of more than 50, NSA Director Keith Alexander says, where American lives were saved.
Investigating post 9/11. I don't recognize the FBI I came into 26 years ago. Our mission is to stop terrorism, to prevent it, not after the fact, to prevent it before it happens in the United States. And I can tell you every tool is essential and vital. And the tools, as I outlined you in the uses today, have been valuable to stopping some of those plots. You ask, how can you put the value on an American life? And I can tell you it's priceless.
I know you want details. Let me just run through these different plots that were stopped. First, you have this one. This was the New York subway plot. An intercepted email from Pakistan led to Nazibullah Zazi, who confessed to a plot to bomb the system. Next one takes us to the New York Stock Exchange. NSA flagged an extremist out of Yemen who led them to Khalid Awzani, who provided information and support to a plot to bomb the exchange. Next one is that the Danish newspaper, the NSA, found that this American specifically working on the plot to bomb the paper that published cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. And the 4th plot that we learned about today, this was a reopened case, one in which the FBI had closed, but the NSA reopened because of what analysts uncovered, and an official said the U.S. was able to, quote-unquote, disrupt terrorist activity. Again, those are 4 of more than 50-plus plots. I want to talk now to 2 former officials from the CIA. Reuel Gerecht is a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, and Bob Baer is a CNN national security analyst. And so, gentlemen, welcome to you. And first, Bob, let me begin with you. When you were listening to the hearings or reading about it, was there one specific detail that you heard that surprised you?
Well, what surprised me, well, didn't surprise me, is there weren't more details. We're essentially taking the word of the National Security Agency that in fact is what undid these plots, and that warrants were not needed.
To that point, I mean, I started wondering, when the government says, basically this is the government saying, trust us, we're going to tell you about these 4 plots. There are 50-plus others that we can't tell you about. Should we, the American public, trust the government?
Brooke, no. I mean, it's, this is, they're investigating themselves, looking into themselves, justifying it, and maybe they're right, but I'd certainly like to see all the evidence from beginning to end before I'd make up my mind, and they've just given partial information about these files, and it's not enough to tell for sure.
Reuel, your thoughts? Reuel, you with me?
Yes, I am.
What are your thoughts here? You agree with Bob that more plots should be declassified?
I think Bob, hi Bob, is being perhaps a tad bit skeptical. I mean, I think you should trust but verify. And I think for an opening statement, this was a pretty good one. I think the government obviously needed to do it after all the brouhaha that this started. But, the PRISM program makes sense. Obviously, it's an intelligence officer's nightmare. People are constantly changing their telephones. Tracking one telephone is extremely difficult. Counterterrorism is always a bit of a needle in a haystack. So I suspect the government, in part, is telling the truth. But I would agree with Bob that I think, we need to look at the cases and re-engineer them, deconstruct them to see if it makes sense.
But isn't there a danger in that? I mean, cases are classified for a reason. You two know that, both having been with the CIA. Is that a responsible thing to do?
Well, obviously, at this point, I think they had to do this. Mm-hmm. So if you were to do this again, I'm sure the government would rather not declassify them, but I'm sure there are things about this that can be declassified. I think we understand in general what PRISM is about. There is certainly a danger that in the future that terrorists will be more cautious in the use of digital communications. They should be already. It's usually people's sloppiness that gets them into trouble. It's not the lack of knowledge of what the United States government is doing.
But, okay, so Bob, now that we're learning all of this has been going on for 7 years, the haystack is getting bigger and bigger, and I know there are still so many people left out there wondering, Bob Baer, with this program, why did Boston happen?
Well, the truth is these programs like PRISM, looking at the internet, metadata on telephones are work best after the event has occurred. Predicting an event is very, very difficult. And that includes a lot of luck in knowing who the pieces are in advance. So looking at this, the mistakes were made by not informing the National Security Agency about these travel, about not turning this system on the Boston bombers in advance before the bombs went off, and they didn't do it. That was a human failing. There's still stovepiping in the government. There's still so many things to fix that we haven't fixed since 9/11. And in totality, this can all work, but unless you make all the pieces work together, it won't.
So then, Reuel, finally to you, let's remember the reason why we're talking about this. The leaker himself, Edward Snowden, who could be anywhere, presumably in Hong Kong, pretty brazen with this live Q&A with The Guardian, yesterday. Do you think he's gotten exactly what he wanted?
I don't know. I mean, I think Mr. Snowden is a bit of a flake, so I think it's difficult to psychologically profile him. He's certainly gotten a lot of attention. I think he knew that was coming. I suspect that he will not kill the program. There is substantial bipartisan support for it in the Congress, and that's really all that's necessary to keep it going.
A flake, so says Reuel Gerecht. Reuel, thank you. Bob Baer, thank you so much for your